Hi, everybody. It has been quite some time since I've done one of my favorite EdTech segments, and that is the 5 podcasts or books that you should be listening to right now. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Leena Saleh, the Edtech Guru, where we are disrupting EdTech and education. All right, let's do this. If you're anything like me, you probably have been loving the content that's been able to be produced over the last few years. Anyone can hop on and produce a podcast right at the fingertips and really give you some inspirational talks and resources and tools and all of those types of things. But today I'm going to cover the 5 books or podcasts you should be listening to right now. Number 1 is Hummingbird Stories. Hummingbird Stories is put on by Donnell Cannon and Jenny O'Meara. They are 2 principals, and they go through and they interview certain people like school designers, community organizers, learning engineers, and education activists to learn what we should be thinking about when it comes to reimagining the future and the steps that we can take to create better schools, better childhoods, and better prepare people for tomorrow. They so far just had their first season wrap up, and it was really great to listen to their different content and the different things that they talked about these stories, about really talking about people throughout the space of education and industry, and just be able to hear what we should really be preparing students for. I love that they're authentic conversations. I also love that they're 2 principals really diving deep into these conversations, because the administrators, it's just great to see administrators taking the ownership for these conversations, because it can't just stem from the teachers. We also need the administrators' help, and it needs to work its way up. And so this has been a really unique experience, and I really enjoyed hearing the different stakeholders that they've been able to speak to and the different conversations that have been had as a result of this podcast. So if you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend that. Number 2 is The Creative Classroom by John Spencer. Now, John Spencer is a former middle school teacher who is now a full-time professor. He has written books and articles, and he has a PBL hub of resources, does some public speaking. What I really enjoyed about his podcast is that he's passionate about seeing teachers be empowered through students, through voice, and the power of choice, but really having that authentic learning. He does have 3 books: Launch, Empower, Vintage, Innovation. So I definitely recommend that you check that out. What I really enjoyed about this first season of The Creative Classroom is being able to just hear his perspective. He has a couple of episodes on empowering readers. He has some different things where he's taken his articles and talked about the power of student choice, and also some creative risks and just some things for deeper learning, and some just different resources that I recommend checking him out for. If you've never heard of him, or maybe you have heard of him, I just love that he talks about you not having to be a martyr, about student-centered learning, and just really talking about, embracing design thinking and just really supporting you with different tools for the intersection of creative thinking and student learning. So really having those different topics and skill sets. He has about 10 episodes that he's done so far, but like I said, he's written lots of articles and lots of books, and he's a big advocate of that project-based learning like I am too, but also at what chance is it? It's really about empowering you, the teachers, to kind of make that move as well. My number 3 choice is What School Could Be by Ted Dintersmith. What's really unique about this book is that Ted actually went to all 50 states to basically seeking, understanding, and kind of seeing what the educational landscape was in each state, and basically to raise awareness about the urgent need to reimagine education to prepare our students of this innovation world that we now live in. As he traveled, he had conversations with teachers, he talked with different stakeholders, and just kind of saw how teachers started at one point with good intentions and kind of where they ended up, and just having these really different conversations, like Louisiana's very heavy in charter schools, and just the different things that were happening across the country, a unified theme, and then what kinds of mindset switches that we could do to really help students and schools and teachers achieve basically reimagining education. He has other books that he's written, The Most Likely to Succeed. He also has a couple of films that he has done. So The Most Likely to Succeed, he talks about that and references it in the book quite regularly. So if you haven't heard or watched it, I would highly recommend it. I just really enjoyed hearing about what was happening in each of the states and really to get a really good general landscape and overlay for what the land looked like in education across the 50 states. I noticed that myself from traveling around to just the different states within the United States and Colorado and Denver and Ohio and Michigan and Atlanta and New Orleans and just the different places I was able to visit, even Tulum, and just seeing the different educational landscape that was there and just what education was looking like in each of those states. I really like how he breaks in and he has hard conversations, even sometimes having to reflect within his own, viewpoint and what there was there, but also giving people a unique insight into what education could be and where the mindset kind of got lost. So it's just something I would highly recommend checking out. I don't think you'll regret it. I personally listened to it through an audiobook, and then I bought the hard copy just so I kind of had some notes to kind of reference and refer to. We really agree and really are right in line with a lot of our thinking about how schools change and how it's really easy to get lost in that piece. Then my number 4 choice, Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12. In Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12, this is a podcast that provides ideas and resources for K-12 teachers and school-based administrators, just kind of talking about there are 417 episodes, so there's quite a lot to kind of dissect there. The most recent episode was about the National Virtual Teachers Association. So being able to build your virtual network of teachers. We've seen that grow from nothing to a very vast environment in the last few years, with most of those conversations happening on Twitter and then authentically being taken offline and happening in Facebook groups. But just being able to kind of have that place for it. I really like how in the podcast itself, this podcast is created by Dr. Stephen Miletto, and he's been an educator in Georgia for 34 years. He served public school families as a history teacher, assistant principal, and high school principal. Then in 2009, was the principal of the year. So he has quite a lot of accolades. He is now the executive director of a regional education service agency in Georgia. And now he's been doing YouTube and creating his own content and kind of just having those conversations. It's just nice to see the different conversations being had about, creative directors, just the story about children and their time during COVID, just a lot of, just really leading K-12 and what are these people in the field doing to basically lead K-12. There's so many rich episodes talking and connecting with people all across the country. It's just something that I really enjoyed listening to these podcast episodes and can't wait to see what other content is being produced here. The last podcast is the EdNext podcast. This is put on by the Education and Edtech media company. They have 230 episodes in which they really discuss and dive into the different components and things that are happening in the education space. These are conversations usually around 20 minutes or so. They feature different people and they talk about different components like state standardized testing, keeping cameras in the classroom, what you can do with snow days and how the national teacher shortage is really affecting different schools. So different conversations that are happening worldwide, being able to dive in a bit deeper within these podcast episodes. So if you haven't checked it out, I would highly recommend adding that to your list. I also want to add just some of my favorites that I continuously listen to are the House of EdTech podcast by Christopher Nesi. I love his real authentic conversations that he has, just talking about things like increasing student engagement, different sorts of topics. Sometimes it's classroom related. Sometimes he's talking about different trends like Clubhouse or just really talking about podcasting itself. He is a teacher in the classroom. His wife is also an educator. So it's just nice to have that different kind of perspective continuously. And then he also has a different podcast called Podcast PD in which he's with Stacey Linz and AJ Bianco. And they do live YouTubes on Sundays. They just have different conversations about the first day of schools, tips and tricks that they have come across, and just different types of episodes in which they allow the audience to kind of chime in and ask those types of questions while they're recording live. AJ Bianco has his own podcast as well called the Reflect Ed podcast. I just really like their conversation is authentic. It doesn't seem scripted and they're just kind of flowing through different thoughts and conversations and it makes you feel like you know them. I've connected with them on Twitter as well well. And I just really have enjoyed the banter we've been able to have through us in our virtual networks. And the last book that I would definitely recommend is Prepared by Diane Taffner. I've read this book several times and just have really enjoyed the raw conversation that she has in the book and just her raw storytelling. Why I really like this book is that I like that she talks about the failures and successes that she has and that she's able to really just identify them and what struggles they were able to do, but also how she was able to get so many people in her corner to make this dream a reality and the pain points that kind of happen throughout that. I hope that you like this content. I hope that you'll give it a thumbs up, share, like, subscribe, comment below. I always love to hear what you're thinking. What are your favorites? Shoot those in the comment box below. And as always, follow me on all of my social media networks. And I look forward to speaking with you guys soon when we disrupt education together. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for following along on this journey. My name is Leena Saleh, the Edtech Guru. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment below. And until next time.